Hi, kindergartners. I am so excited to read with you today because we're going to read one of my favorite books. This book is called Thank You, Amu. Before we get started, we're always going to do three things. The first is we're going to ask a good reader question. And that question today is, when is a time that you shared something or a time that someone else shared something with you? Take a second and think about that. And then if you can, pause the video and talk to someone close to you about a time you shared or a time someone else shared something with you. Great, thank you. The word that will help us understand this book is the word Amu. It's the name of the main character, but the author also wrote something called the author's note, which is a letter to the readers. This says author's note. In this author's note, the author told me that Amu is the Igbo word for queen. Igbo is a language from Nigeria, but she also used Amu to mean grandma when she was a kid. So that's a word we're gonna need to know. We always notice and wonder about the cover before we get started. So right now, take a second and notice. So say what you see and also what you wonder, the questions that you have, what you want to know. Great, thank you for doing that. I notice that there is an envelope right here. I notice also that this looks like a card, and it looks like a thank you card because it says thank you, Amu. That makes me wonder, what did Amu do that someone else is feeling grateful for and is saying thank you for? I know a couple of things about Amu's identity. I know that Amu identifies as a woman. I know that Amu identifies as Black. And I know that Amu's age identity is as an older person. We are going to focus on a certain good reader skill in this book. And that skill is what we have been doing all week, what you did with Miss Dunn yesterday and with Mr. O'Connor on Monday, which is text to self connections. So things that are the same about something in the book and in your life. Let's get started. Thank you, Amu. On the corner of First Street and Long Street on the very top floor, Amu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned and stirred it and took a small taste. "What a delicious stew," Amu said. "Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I have ever had." That stew sounds delicious. With that, Amu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, its scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall toward the street, and around the block until, knock, someone was at the door. When Amu opened it, she saw a little boy. "Little boy," Amu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was playing with my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell." The little boy replied, "What is it?" "Thick red stew." Stew," he sighed. "That sure sounds yummy." Amu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a bit. It would not hurt to share. "Would you like some?" The little boy nodded. And so Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the little boy said, and went on his way. Oh, that makes me think about my wondering from the cover about what Amu did. Now I know one thing Amu did was to give stew to this little boy. And he said, "Thank you, Amu." I'm having a text to self connection also because my husband, Mr. Dan, loves to cook. And sometimes when he cooks, I get to have some of what he made. And that makes me think of how this little boy gets to have something delicious that someone else made. With that, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. As she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until, knock, knock, someone was at the door. When Amu opened the door, this time she saw a police officer. "Miss Police Officer," Amu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell," Miss Police Officer replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." Ah, stew, she said, and her mouth watered. That sounds mighty tasty. Amu thought for a moment. There was still enough to share. Would you like some? The police officer nodded. Once again, Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Amu, the officer said, and went on her way. And so, for the second time, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. Sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until... knock, knock, knock. Again, someone was at Amu's door. This time when she opened it, she saw... a hot dog vendor. Mr. Hot Dog Vendor, Amu exclaimed, what brings you to my home? I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell, Mr. Hot Dog Vendor replied. What is it? Thick red stew. Ooh, stew. The vendor licked his lips. That sounds quite delectable. So Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Amu, the hot dog vendor said, and went on his way. Throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Amu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker, even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Amu shared. I can tell that one thing that Amu believes in, one thing that her heart and her brain know to be true, is that sharing is important. Soon the sky darkened, the streetlights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Amu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, it was empty. Oh no! I thought it was so good that she was sharing, but now I'm thinking maybe she shouldn't have shared so much because there's nothing left. Amu sniffled. There goes the best dinner I ever had. Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until... Knock, 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 knock. Who could that be? Amu wondered. When she opened her door, she saw the little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed today was at her door. I'm sorry, everyone, Amu sighed. My thick red stew is all gone. I have nothing left to share. The little boy tugged at Amu's sleeve. Don't worry, Amu. We are not here to ask. We are here to give. I wonder what they're going to give her. The police officer carried in a fresh salad. The mayor entered with a roast chicken. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Even the little boy presented Amu with something special in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Amu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate, danced, and celebrated. While Amu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. That dinner was the best she had ever had. A good reader question today is, why do you think that was the best dinner that Amu ever had? Remember, a good answer will include some evidence, either from what the illustrator showed you or from what the author told you. Take a second and think, why did Amu think that was the best dinner she had ever had? If you can, pause the video and talk to someone close to you. Great. My answer is that I think this was the best meal Amu ever had because the author said, while Amu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. And I'm thinking that because she's surrounded by all these people and they're showing her that they care about her, that's what's making this the best meal that she's ever had. Remember, before we started, we said we were going to practice having text to self connections, finding ways that this book, this story, these characters are similar to something in our lives. So today we're going to talk about that. What is something in the book that is the same as your life? What is a text to self connection that you have? Take a second and think about that. Great. I'll share my answer with you, and then I would love for you to share your answers back with your teachers. We would love to see what your text to self connection is. So my text to self connection is that every year, a group of friends that I have all come together and we all have a huge meal together to celebrate the friendship that we have together. And that really made me think of Thank You, Amu, because in the end, all of these people came together, and the author said that they ate, they danced, and they celebrated. And that feels very similar to how I eat and celebrate with my friends every year during this big meal that we have together. One way that I could show this is by drawing this. I could also write about that, or I could just tell someone with my words about the text to self connection that I have. You have the same options. You are welcome to draw your text to self connection, you're welcome to write about it, or both, or you're welcome to tell someone about it, or you're welcome to tell us about it. We can't wait to see what you do today. Thank you for reading with me.